Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah wa alihi wa sahbihi wa azwajihi wa dhurriyyatihi ajma'in. This is the continuation from the last session which we couldn't complete. And the last session provided sort of context for for this reading. So where are we? Let's start from here. If physics constitutes a really coherent and genuine knowledge of perceptively known objects, the traditional theory of matter, that is Cartesian empiricist theory of matter, must be rejected. Especially empiricist theory of must be rejected for the obvious reason that the theory reduces the evidence of our senses, on which alone the physicist as observer and experimenter must rely, to the mere impressions of observer's mind. So the argument here is twofold. On the one hand, conception of physics, and on the other hand, a theory of matter, traditional theory of matter, which is based on empiricist epistemology. And for Iqbal, these two cannot be combined. So he accepts the physicist's account of how he or she works, and then claims, and I think his understanding of the empiricist theory of knowledge is correct, and he claims that they can't combine, or the aims of physics are incompatible with empiricist theory. So the answer is the empiricist theory must be rejected by physics, on which implicitly or explicitly it has been relying since 17th, 18th century. So first is the conception of physics. Iqbal's conception of physics. What is physics? Or what are its aims and how it works? We talked a bit about it before as well. But in these lines we just read, Allama Iqbal says that if physics constitutes a really coherent and genuine knowledge of perceptibly known objects, the traditional theory must be rejected for the obvious reason that it reduces the evidence on which alone the physicist. So physics relies on. So the first thing is, Allama Iqbal thinks that physics relies on evidence of our senses. Mainly. Actually, he says alone, so not just even mainly. This as an physicist as so physics observer, so an experimenter. The physicist. So the basis of physics is observation and experiment. And for these two, physicists must rely on evidence of our senses. Okay. This is its conception of how physics actually works. Evidence-based, evidence are provided by senses and based on observation and experiment. Obviously, this is voodoo conception of physics. Physics doesn't work like that. Physics is not what he thinks physics is. But given that that's what he thinks physics is, then he goes on to claim that this physics cannot rely on a theory of matter which is employed by empiricist epistemology and ontology. Okay. So what is that ontology and epistemology? So one of the main problems with theory of matter and the epistemology behind it, which is an empiricist epistemology, is that it reduces the evidence of our senses to mere, as one, second, impressions of observer's mind. So the observer, the physicist, is not observing a reality directly through evidence of senses, but this evidence of senses is reduced to mere impressions of mind. And there's no, I'll just explain what it means. So here I think he is right about empiricism. He's right about empiricism, but he's not right about physics. Now, empiricism generally claims that it is about experience, and it relies on experience, and it rejects speculation and abstraction. Of rationalism. But empiricism is not really about how we experience the world, or its theory of how we experience the world is itself an abstraction. And that abstraction is based on that abstraction implies a theory of matter, as Iqbal says, where you don't have any direct experience of the matter. That's why consistent empiricists like Hume and Berkeley, they rejected Locke's notion of substance. Even though their own empiricism is, not something which we actually experience, or it's not really a good description of what we experience or how we experience. So what is this empiricist version? How does empiricism thinks that we encounter through our senses objects in the world and how we perceive them? But we have gone through it several times, but let's go over it once more. So according to empiricism, like for example Locke, we get knowledge of the world through senses, and through senses we don't perceive objects, but through sense impressions we get what was later later empiricists called sense data or impressions. And through impressions, what we perceive is different qualities of an object. So when I'm looking at a chair, I don't actually directly see a chair. What I see is, at subconscious level anyway, what I see is color, texture, length and breadth, and depth through different senses. And those impressions give me knowledge about different qualities. And basically there are two types of qualities, primary qualities and secondary qualities. That's all we get through sense. And our mind actually combines those senses through association and other means to create a bundle through which we sort of infer something called chair. And if we, what we perceive is, what we perceive is different qualities and not something solid called chair or something, some specific thing called chair directly, then the question arises, what holds these different qualities, primary and secondary qualities, into a bundle which refers to something we call chair through inference? And Locke called it substance, and we don't actually experience substance, but we infer that there is something more solid behind these, which holds these primary and secondary qualities into an object called chair. So what Allama Iqbal is calling here unknown, imperceptible, so this substance, so-called, it's imperceptible because I never actually experience substance called chair, for example. So in that sense, it is imperceptible entity and unverifiable. Only I infer through my reason that these qualities, the bundle of these qualities which I associate with chair, can't hold themselves. So I infer that there must be something more stable which doesn't change, which hold these qualities which themselves change. So in that sense, substance or this matter underneath these qualities, or this solid underneath these qualities, is basically inferred. It is never perceived. So in that sense, it's unverified. So funnily enough, empiricist theory is based on something which is empirically unverifiable and which we can't experience actually directly. So this is the theory which Allama Iqbal is rejecting on the basis that since physics is based on only alone based on evidence of senses, and since this matter or this substance is something which senses can't perceive, we must reject this matter because physics is actually correct, that our knowledge should be based on the evidence of senses, observation and experiment alone. And it shouldn't be built on something which is imperceptible, unverifiable, and in that sense unempirical. So that's Alan Iqbal's argument, okay, and he will develop this argument. And so then physics needs a different sort of epistemology, and for Iqbal that would be sort of a version of Hegelian phenomenology, but we'll see. So let's go back to the text and then we'll stop here for today. So if physics constitute a really coherent and genuine knowledge of perceptively known objects, the traditional theory of matter must be rejected for the obvious reason that it reduces the evidence of our senses on which alone where's the alone I wanted to alone the physicist. Obviously, I reject that physics relies on sense evidence alone, but that's his version. So alone, the physicist as observer and experimenter must rely to the mere impressions of observer's mind. So Alam Iqbal rejects empiricism because of his understanding of how physics works or should work. Okay, so next time, inshallah, we'll start from here between nature and the observer of nature. Okay. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa alihi wa sahbihi wa azwajihi wa dhurriyyatihi bi rahmatika ya